Well, thank you very much, Chair Merkley and Ranking Member Murkowski. I'm really pleased that both of you are leading this important subcommittee because I know both of you understand, like Vice Chair Collins and I do, that we have a responsibility to work in a timely fashion, in a bipartisan way, to pass these funding bills that keep our families safe and our nation strong and competitive. So I look forward to working with both of you to do just that as we return to regular order. And this hearing is an important reminder on how these issues this subcommittee deals with are critical to all of our families back home. For one, we have to make sure our nation lives up to its commitment to our tribes, providing the necessary federal support and honoring our commitment to their sovereignty. That's why I want to underscore my support for Chair Merkley's efforts on tribal sovereignty payments. We also have a moral obligation to leave the next generation a world in better shape than we found it. So we have to keep in mind defense spending isn't the only way that we protect our nation. The critical issues we're talking about here today are directly connected to the security of our country and the strength of our economy. We have to protect and restore our environment so we can pass on to our kids clean air and thriving forests and healthy ecosystems that support strong communities. And we must ensure that our kids have safe drinking water, free of lead contamination and harmful chemicals like PFAS. Our national parks are national treasures, bringing in tourists and dollars from around the world to local communities in every corner of our nation, and giving our families a great place to see the outdoors and explore our country. They also remind us that our security and our strength directly connected to how well we care for our environment, our ability to tackle the climate crisis, for instance, because families are less safe when climate disasters become more frequent, when wildfires devastate our communities. Any Western state can tell you that. When ecosystems are upended by invasive species, like we're dealing with the European green crab in Washington State right now, or when rising temperatures create prolonged droughts impacting our farmers and our wildlife and our day-to-day life. And when we fail to prevent and respond to those disasters, we are weaker and less competitive in the world as well. In my home state of Washington, salmon is a way of life. They are a huge part of our economy, our history, and our culture. Protecting and restoring salmon habitat and increasing salmon runs is key to our state's strength and its future. And saving salmon is also a part of meeting our obligation to our tribes. And there's so many other examples like this that make clear why protecting our land and our water and our air and our environment is so important to our country's future. So I'm very glad to have this opportunity to discuss how we can invest in doing just that to strengthen our nation. So Secretary Haaland, welcome to the committee. As I mentioned, salmon is a way of life in my home state. Can you talk about how this budget will help with salmon recovery and what investments will support hatchery maintenance and operations?
Thank you very much, Chair Murray. And yes, salmon is a way of life for so many communities, and I've been able to visit many of those communities, so I understand it's not just the food you eat, but it's a cultural way of life for so many people. And I'm very proud of our fish hatcheries. In fact, I went to a fish hatchery when I was in Oregon just a couple weeks ago. But around 1 million to 2 million salmon now return to the Columbia Basin annually. Of those, a majority are hatchery fish. So those are important entities that we want to make sure that we support. The budget maintains support for hatchery operation and includes significant increase, $15 million to address hatchery deferred maintenance work. $80 million for national fish hatchery operations. That's a plus $6 million for this budget, and plus $23 million on hatchery maintenance and equipment.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is something I'm going to follow very closely, so I know both of our committee chair and ranking member will as well. I wanted to ask you about the European green crab. It is a globally damaged invasive species that is of particular concern in my home state. We need to get ahead of this now to protect the native crab populations. How does U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service intend to work with National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to address this threat?
Thank you. And invasive species, of course, across the country is a giant concern for all of us. The Fish and Wildlife Service continues to coordinate and participate in European green crab control efforts. And we work with partners. They work with partners to develop a draft national control plan, and that's expected in April. And also, the Fish and Wildlife Service conducts early detection, monitoring, control, and removal of these crabs on Pacific Northwest refuges, the refuges that Fish and Wildlife Service manages. So it also provides grants to states to implement statewide aquatic nuisance species management plans. So we'll work with states to make sure that we can help with this invasive species.
Okay, thank you. We'll be working with you on this as we move forward. And finally, in the West, wildfire and droughts are actually two sides of the same coin. While this year's atmospheric rivers have given us a lot of rain, we know that climate change is impacting the long-term hydrology across our country. I recently spoke with Commissioner Towton about Reclamation's work on droughts. I wanted to ask you about agencies within Interior. How do they work in tandem to deal with the issue of drought?
Thank you. So we take an all-of Department of Interior approach to address drought, specifically in the West, because we know we need to build long-term resilience. And so that includes making sure that we're working not only with states, local communities, but also with Indian tribes. And so the Geological Survey as well as the Fish and Wildlife Service both play a critical role in working to remedy these impacts and our changing climate. And they provide actionable science for land and water managers to inform resource management activities. In 2024, the U.S. Geological Survey proposes $6.5 million to provide resource managers with decision support tools to better understand this issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.